Hello and welcome to the breakdown. We're not in level 4, we are not in level 3, we are in level 2. We are not in lockdown. I'm Jeff Wilson, Bernadine Oliver Kirby, Mills Muliaina. Bernie, how did you spend your first weekend with a little bit of freedom?
There was a little bit of freedom actually, but you go from being stuck inside the house to almost fear of going out. You know, I haven't driven a car in quite some time, apart from 200 metres up to the supermarket. So it's a whole lot of firsts. I don't know. What about you guys?
Did you find a way, Mills, to maybe just get 10 people together? Was that the number? Okay, who are my select group? Who comes together? Who do I celebrate with? But also, who do I keep my distance from?
Mate, I'll tell you, I haven't got 10 friends. So there's a very select few that I'm going to invite round. So, but like Bernie, you're right. I mean, even getting out, you're still a little bit hesitant. You're still staying within that sort of social distancing. But how good is it to be out and just be able to go somewhere else apart from around your block? It's just absolutely outstanding.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, the Super Rugby teams, they have gathered. They got together yesterday. They've started their fitness testing. We'll talk to Razor Robertson. We'll hear from Patrick Tuipulotu later on in the show. But there's plenty for us to catch up with in regards to what's been happening over the last 7 days. So many people have had to deal with so many things. A lot of people have been thrust into the limelight on tonight's show, The Breakdown. We have one of those, and we all tuned in most days for about 8 weeks to 1 p.m. to hear Dr. Ashley Bloomfield and the Prime Minister most of the time talk about where we were at. And look, you've become a superstar, Doc, and reality is you've done a fantastic job. How did you deal with that? All of a sudden, you were the public face, I suppose, of the medical fraternity about the direction we were going in terms of COVID-19.
Yeah, oh, well, g'day, Goldie. Look, it's great to be on the show. And yeah, it came as a real surprise, actually. Very early on, we decided to start doing these daily press stand-ups more as a way to manage all the media interests. You know, we were just inundated with media inquiries every day. And we thought, actually, I think it was late January, we thought, well, let's do a daily stand-up. They can all traipse up the road and come and listen and hear it all at the same time and ask any questions they like. And so it was also part of, I guess, being open and transparent. We wanted to let the public know what was happening. It was a rapidly evolving situation, and it was just a good way to keep everybody up to date. And then it developed into this sort of 1 o'clock update where I think, especially once we got into lockdown, everybody just felt connected by linking in. They're stuck at home anyway. They could all find out at the same time, look, how are we doing, what's happening? And they felt connected to that kind of collective effort, the team of 5 million.
I'm interested in your mindset, you know, going into there and saying to your team, you've often talked about your team, about the decision you're about to make, and it's going to be a huge decision. It would have been a massive outcry about how it was going to look. You know, I liken it to rugby. Some guys, in your team, if you're a captain, you tell them about things, they don't actually agree and they don't do as they're told. And I know that sort of happened. I won't mention any names down in Dunedin, and it wasn't Stephen. But what's your mindset there when you're going into a meeting like that, into your big team, and decide, well, this is what has to happen?
Yeah, well, the first thing, of course, is, and this was also about our approach with the public, communication's a two-way thing. So, you know, you can't pass on the message you want them to hear unless you've listened first. And of course, for us, a big part of that listening was looking really hard at what was happening around New Zealand and what was happening around the globe, because things were moving so fast. And then also, I wasn't going into meetings, whether that was with ministers or others, to give them advice, just with, look, here's what I think. I'd make sure I'd done my homework. I'd ring around some of those key advisors, some of the key academics, and just get their take on it and run my ideas past them. So again, it wasn't just my ideas that I was putting forward. It wasn't just my plan, my advice. And so, yeah, doing the homework and bringing people with you. And that was really, especially as we started to make those big calls, the real challenge and opportunity was to bring the whole country with us, because the success or failure depended on everyone doing their bit. So going into a meeting, was doing your homework, getting all the evidence, getting your intelligence right there, and then coming up with a really clear plan, decisive plan. But this was the other critical thing. We had to change direction. It became really clear that if we kept moving through what our pandemic plan said to do, which was keep it out, stamp it out, oh, look, we've got cases, let's manage it. Every other country that had done that was in a power of trouble. And so we had to be able to be really flexible and adaptable. So, yep, we had a game plan, but then we had to be really conscious what was happening around us and be prepared to change the plan in response.
Were there times when you were going to those press conferences where the conversations you knew were going to be difficult? Was it an uncomfortable walk, knowing the fact that today is a little bit more difficult than it was yesterday?
Oh, for sure. And, the big leadership challenge, of course, is not having complete information. And that's where you've got to still be able to be confident enough, but also be honest, be open, be authentic. Actually, here's what we know and here's what we don't know. And even talking to my team here in the ministry, and I've had Zoom meetings with all my people leaders, maybe 150 a couple of times. And I was honest with them. I said, look, there are things we don't know, and I've got to be honest with you. Yeah, I have moments of self-doubt, but that's okay. It's all right not to know everything. It's all right to be questioning, and that's when you have to just, I guess, you draw on your experience and skills, but also that's when the value of the team around you really helps.
You have got a bit of a pedigree in rugby, though. You have played this game. I mean, what's your experience been in combination with rugby union?
Oh, look, yeah, I started out with the Tawa bantamweights when I was 4. Of course, at that time, the Tawa club, the Mexsteads were quite big in Tawa. Murray and Alan Mexstead both played for Tawa. And occasionally, even in later years, you'd see Murray playing for them, wearing his Tawa jersey and his all black socks. I can still distinctly remember that. I went through, and I guess the pinnacle of my career was playing for the Scots College First 15. We weren't that flash back in those days. In more recent years, the Scots First 15s had great success on the national stage here. Back in those days, we made the mistake of one of only 2 games we won that season was a grading game. And so that meant we got hammered for the rest of the season.
You had a leadership role then, though, didn't you? You had a leadership role. We've gone to Scots College, and it sits proudly on the wall. This picture of you in the first 15. There, you're in the front row. Here it is, off the middle, vice captain. What position were you again?
Oh, well, in those days, I played flanker. Yeah, I was on the blindside flanker. I have to say, in my rugby career, I played just about every position on the field. I think I finished up my last ever game was playing hooker for the Auckland Medical School team against the Engineers.
So you're looking forward to the start of Super Rugby Aotearoa. Who's your team?
Yeah, it's the Canes, of course. Been in Wellington all along since they even started the Hurricanes, and pretty tough team to follow, to be a supporter of. But you dig in and you wait, and you've got to be resilient. You've got to just stay the course with the Canes. Look, I am looking forward to the start of the season. I know a lot of people are, so that's one of the big things about getting out of alert levels 4 and 3. Is the professional sport can start up again, and of course in a few weeks' time as well, we'll see club sports starting up. And I know the clubs are doing a lot of work to make sure they can do that safely, and I'm sure there's a lot of people looking forward to getting back into the club sport.
I remember how I celebrated when the Highlanders, and I didn't do it as a player, Highlanders won their first title. Do you vividly remember when the Hurricanes won their first super title?
Yeah, I do. I do remember, because we've been disappointed quite a few times. And I think from memory, the season before, we thought we were onto it, and then the Blimmin' Highlanders took it out at the last minute. And so that was a big disappointment. So yeah, I do remember that first win, and it was a long time coming, but yeah, great feeling.
Did you celebrate it in style?
Oh, of course, but I won't go into any detail.
Oh, good. Good.
I don't want to get carried away, because I know we're almost in stamping this virus out, but I want to turn my attention to a little bit of mental health. It'd be remiss of me not to ask something along those lines, given my colleague, Sir JK. But where's that focus got to now, given everything that's happened?
Oh, look, it's a really important part of the whole response. And we've had some work and some new kind of interventions and approaches. And actually, JK's got one, his Mentemia app that he's made available during the lockdown period, because some people have found it really hard been in that lockdown situation, not being able to connect with people. So we've made a number of new resources available, and even as we come out of lockdown, and we're still in this situation where there's a lot of uncertainty. And of course, as humans, we don't deal with uncertainty very well. It's actually just not part of our evolutionary makeup. So I think people will, and they should expect to feel stressed, to feel anxious. That's okay. So talk to your friends, seek help if you need to. Online resources, some of these apps are really good, and build some things into your routine. Physical activity is a great thing for both mental and physical well-being. A bit of time out, meditation, just mindfulness, these sorts of things are really good. And I think JK talks about it as mental fitness. I really like that term. It's about, it's not just a passive reactive thing. It's actually, you can build up your mental fitness just as you can build up your physical fitness.
The decision at the moment is that group of 10, which obviously means that sports, a lot of sports, can't get going. Single sports, yes, we've seen the likes of golf and tennis where there is some separation. How do you come to those decisions? What are the key things that will determine whether or not those groups can grow just enough so those larger team sports can get one step closer to competition?
Yeah, we're all keen to see that, aren't we? And it's not just sport. I think at all sorts of gatherings, whether it's, religious and faith-based gatherings, just being able to get together for family get-togethers, for special events. But on the sporting front, the same thing. We're just wanting to see that those cases not only stay low, but that we're not seeing any new cases spring up around the place. The big thing was it was a big step from level 3 to level 2. And the gatherings were the ones that we knew were the highest risk. But right at the moment, we're already developing up our advice for Cabinet to consider next week. And that one of the key things that they'll be making a decision on Monday about is whether we can increase that number from 10 up to, say, 50. And we know that we're heading for 100. That's the end point, at least in alert level 2. So hopefully within the week, it'll be all systems go if we can keep those case numbers down. And again, that relies on everybody continuing to play their part, which they've done superbly today.
What are the concerns, if you have any right now, about where we're at? And the fact, I suppose, is we want everyone to do what they can. Today was that first day, and it seemed to me, and I was out and about in Auckland, that is there a danger that people get back to normal life, just don't continue to make those sacrifices that we've done so well over the last 8 weeks?
Yeah, that's always a risk. And I think as life appears to be more normal around us, people may kind of ease off or slacken off. So we've just got to keep up the work we've put in. We don't want to head back into alert level 3 or 4. We don't want to see an outbreak again, and we certainly don't want to, go down the path we're seeing happen in other countries. We can stay in alert level 2 and even think about going to alert level 1 if we just keep doing the basics well. Again, it's like a game of rugby. You've got to do the basics well. It's those baseline public health measures, distancing, hygiene, cleaning, not going out or going to work if you're unwell. And those are the things that will actually get us through this. So, it is a long game. It's not a point in time. We're not going to eradicate this virus. It's a sustained effort. But just doing the basics well will be the thing that'll absolutely see us right through this. We
did see, though, in some of your press conferences, you did use some terminology used in rugby. Who threw those in to the conversation? The Prime Minister, yourself? Was it Grant Robertson, who we're talking to a little bit later on in the show about, I suppose, keeping it real for people at home? Who threw those in the conversation?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly. I was.
I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, right at the start of this, I was thinking about, one of the analogies I was using with my team is this is like a Rugby World Cup. Actually, you've got to go out there. You've got to see who's the team you're playing against in that very first pool match, and you go into the game plan, and you've got to play to your plan. But then you've also got to flex. You've got to adapt if things are not going very well. And so, in a sense, we've finished the first pool match. And there are others to follow, and the next team we'll be playing will be a different team. So we've got to adjust. We've got to be prepared to flex and follow along like that. So I think the prize at the end, you could argue, is being in the final in our best shape, when hopefully we've got either good treatments or a good vaccine here. But we've got to just keep our focus. We've got to keep physically and mentally fit right through the campaign here, and be prepared to adjust as we learn more as time goes by.
It sounds like we could have done with you in Japan last year. It could have been handy. That could have been really, really handy. I've got one last question, and this has come from my beautiful wife. She wants to know whether or not she should continue to clean the food after she's gone and done the shopping.
Oh, yeah, that's a personal choice on that one. Okay. It doesn't happen in our household, except, of course, where it makes sense at any time.
Dr. Bloomfield, thank you so much for your time. It's been great to catch up. Thank you for all the great work you have done. I know you've got a few more press conferences to get through. You do look as though you're as comfortable as an All Black coach now up there. You've handled everything magnificently, and stay safe. Thank you once again, and thank you so much for coming on The Breakdown.
Kia ora, thanks for the opportunity. It was great to join you.
Yes, it was announced last week, June 13th, Super Rugby kicks off, Super Rugby Aotearoa. The Crusaders have got the bye week, Wayne. They don't kick off till the 21st. Scott Robertson joins us on the show. And Razor, yesterday, your team, the Crusaders, come into camp. What was the feeling like for you, just as you were driving in to the facility about, I suppose, this group of players coming together for the first time in a couple of months?
Yeah, look, it was a chance to reflect that drive. It's 25 minutes from Sunderland, just thinking how long we'd actually been away and when was the last time we come into Rugby Park, and just excited to give a few ear hugs and a few fist pumps and just to get face to face and just feel the energy of the boys. So it was a good morning. It was a good feeling. It's tough for the players and a little bit of mindset. So it's great to see each other, and then you get on the line and do a Bronco. So just straight on mindset, boys. Here we go. How's your lockdown treated you?
What a good guy. What a good guy on the line. As soon as they come in, right on the line, the whole group. How did they come into this? We've heard yesterday there was some PBs coming out of the Blues. Was it the same down in Christchurch?
Yeah, a couple of boys hit their target. We weren't quite rocket field like Bowden. That was pretty special. 412 is some example, and just probably shows how good the Barretts are. Scooter Barrett for us was 413. No, not quite. It's totally speculative, but he wasn't far behind. Look, we had some great results. There's a couple of guys that, probably couldn't, will improve over the next 5 weeks. But in the entirety of the squad, we're pretty pleased. And look, with the Fisher on bye, gives us an extra week to really connect. We'll get an internal game in before, the week everyone starts, the first week of the comp, and gets us to have a look at what everyone else is doing and play the Hurricanes next week up there away.
What sort of mental state did you see the players over the last couple of days as they've come in? What have you noticed about them after spending a couple of months away from each other?
What did I notice? It's quite interesting. It's just good to get face-to-face contact. I made quite a few phone calls afterwards just to get a little bit deeper, because you're mindful where the first group come in and then they were shipping on and the next group was on the way out. So you get a physical look at them. They're definitely, some of them have missed, getting sort of 3 to 4 big gym sessions in a week, but it'll come back really quickly. And, those front row boys, nothing, when you haven't got something to proper push against or scrum against, they're just not the same humans, are they? They've got to push, they've got to be boring in or something. So they were quite excited, and that'll happen in the next few days. They'll start climbing into each other and getting a bit of head on shoulder. And but the boys were just pumped, just get the ball in their hands. They felt better, so much better afterwards. And in the reality, here we go again. We're into it, just like everyone. The sense of the self-worth is back.
Has there been any more clarity in terms of, how travelling looks for you guys? I know there's been talk of chartered flights and things like that. Has there been any more sort of clarity around how that looks for you guys?
Yeah, good question. We're still looking for that clarity. We're in and out. It's just how long before the game will land. Is it 4 to 5 hours? Then you got your meals, and then you go into your little corporate area at the ground, and it's how you manage that time really well. So like all teams, we'll be really planned and well rehearsed in what we're going to do coming into the Westpac Trust, which we know so well, week 1, and then obviously we're home back to Orange Theory. So we've got a ground now, guys. How good's that?
Yeah.
We're back. It probably the excitement and the uniqueness to look at it that way, like we have as a probably culture in the nation and in the world. We've adapted to what's in front of us, and it's a little bit old school. Just get there, arrive, and play. So it's quite cool in a way. It's definitely changed the normal grind.
Yeah, look, it is a significantly different competition now. So when you look at this Super Rugby Aotearoa, and you've won 3 conventional titles in a row, how do you approach this title? How do you factor in and motivate yourself? Does this become a little bit more special, the fact that it's going to take, I suppose, some big performances over a sustained period of time to win this?
Yeah, it's a bit of a Survivor Series, isn't it? You got to go at it. And if you look at the results, over the last few years, majority of these games are won in the last sort of 10, 15 minutes, and they're hard fought, hugely physical, all those sorts of things, and they're quality players. So to do it week after week is pretty special. So it's a different chapter in Super Rugby. Like to say that you've taken this, you're the best of the New Zealand teams, which have been in the final series. Normally 4 out of the 5 teams get in the top 8, or close to it every year. And the Blues, resurgent. It's you can write a pretty special chapter in your history of your club.
You got some pretty unique history in terms of your ground and the fortress that you've created down there. But Razor, no crowds. And one of the biggest things about going down there is the stick that you get from the crowd, mate. I know you think outside the box, bro. So are we going to hear some noise over the intercom and a bit of banter over there, mate?
Well, yeah, look, as you know, we're pretty sort of a calm sort of a setup down here, our fans.
Hey.
Very.
Who's the guy that's forever winding them up? That's the first thing you do.
Yeah, look, it is quite unique. I'm actually going to come sideline, like, those managers on football do.
Oh.
And just start winding the team up, start pointing, pretend I know what I'm doing down the sideline and climb into it that way. Now, look, we've actually talked a lot of different ways. Obviously, get your music and the sound coming on top, but it's all of the ownership that the boys are going to have to take on, how they're going to stay really connected to each other, how they're going to create a sense this is Nunia. Let's embrace it. Let's bring our own enthusiasm to it. Yeah, a bit of it's going to do. A lot of it's going to do your preparation into it. Once you've accepted you haven't got a crowd, just climb into it and let your shoulders do the talking.
There's been a lot of talk around the game, though, Razor. The fact we've seen that you've got ideas about how we grow this sport, how we take this game globally. Obviously, Sanzar and New Zealand Rugby are challenging themselves to find what's in the best interest of everyone in the Southern Hemisphere. You're optimistic the fact that we're going to find those opportunities and we are going to get ourselves into the global game?
Look, there's some incredible conversations and openness. This is probably the first time we've had it, as we all know, that we can go really, what can this look like, and how can we get what the best for rugby is. I've got the feedback, got all the understanding from the data and the survey, and now the guys at the top are having some great conversations. Once we get lined up, and what we're excited about, and all the coaches around Super Rugby is we can actually test ourselves at that next level. Again, if it's a Japanese team or if it's the Northern Hemisphere, if our focus is to go north and fill their stadiums up for the next few years to help rugby, great, let's go and do it. But I think the clear vision and the understanding is we're starting to get more aligned around it. So it's really positive.
Mate, I love what you've said today, particularly about the fact that this could be something unique and special for Super Rugby sides. We know, as always, as a Crusaders group, you'll come together, you'll be prepared, and you'll put your best foot forward, mate. It's nice to see you nice and relaxed, because I know over the next month there'll be some challenging times, but it's game on. And for you on that first game, I'm looking forward to seeing what plans you've come up with and how you guys are going, mate. Thanks for giving us an update. Look after yourself, and we'll talk to you soon.
Cheers, guys. Stay sharp. Thank you.
Well, it is a happy 50th birthday. No, not to me. The Rugby News celebrates that this month. On the cover, the one and only Richie McCaw. Speaking of Richie McCaw, we asked the Super Rugby players at the start of the season who was the toughest player ever to play Super Rugby.
Toughest Super Rugby player? I think we have to go to Aussie for that one, for Michael Hooper. Body on the line, he's a freak, but his eyes are too close together, really freaks me out.
Nah, I'd have to disagree with that. It would have to be a Kiwi somewhere around here.
Kevin Mialamu.
165
games for the Blues.
One of the toughest guys I've ever played against, but off the field, an absolute gentleman.
Jerry Collins.
Gus Collins, probably.
Jerry Collins.
Oh, that's pretty solid. I've seen this so many times over the years.
Someone like the Wyatt Crockett, his longevity in the game. Liam Messam played over 150.
Liam Messam, we're hungry for physicality and wanting to be brutal, but he backed up his words. Like he'd say what he wanted the team to do, and then he'd go out and he'd lead it.
Toughest player to play the game, I think along the lines of Brad Thorne. Brad Thorne maybe?
Brad Thorne, powerful charge!
Played many sports.
Even just watching, I was like, oh, that's a hard man. I reckon Richie McCaw. He's always got his head in dark places and done a lot of things that other flankers couldn't.
Matt Todd's a tough dude, man. He puts himself in hard situations.
Rodney Suyalo. Asi Manu seems a bit of a legend, playing a 2015 game with his eyes stitched open.
Conrad, he was tough. 90 kgs, dripping wet.
Luaki, the 8th man from the Chiefs. Jeez, I loved when he played.
Jerome Kano.
Jerome Kano. You always were wondering where he was. He was a scary man. The best guy off the field. Some of the Dane Coles, once across the line, he didn't give a hoot. If you weren't in his team, he was going to smash you, and it was violent.
Welcome back to the breakdown. Now, before I launch into some headlines, I want you to take a peek at this picture, and in particular, the chap wearing the red shorts. That is, in fact, Michael Fatialofa, who was in a spinal unit in the UK, paralysed from the neck down after a rugby injury in January. Now, his wife Tatiana took this picture with the caption, "Just out for a casual stroll," a 2-kilometre stroll, in fact. Well, lockdown would have any of us struggling with that distance, so to be clocking that up just 4 months after thinking life would be confined to a wheelchair is utterly inspirational. Our thoughts with you, Tatiana and Michael Fatialofa. Well, while we're seeing players return home and the likes of Sam Whitelock and Nehemiah Skada, South Africa, they're farewelling some of their greats. Super Rugby franchise, the Lions, they are hemorrhaging money, and they've given players the option to cancel their contracts and look for work elsewhere. Well, the Aussies, they're feeling it too, as if they need another headline. 3 Queensland Red players, they've been stood down after they refused to take a pay cut. Now, let me refresh you. A 60% pay cut for 6 months was agreed to by Rugby Australia and the Players Association. Now, the QRU, they've been forced to exclude Wallaby second rower Isaac Rodder, along with Isaac Lucas and Harry Hockings, who, well, they're not prepared to wear the financial shortfall in their contracts. Coach Brad Thorne, understandably, is very upset by the decision. No real winners here, are there, except maybe the lawyers, because it seems that's the way it's heading. Hamish, the Hammer McLennan, is a new director on the board. He earned the nickname for being able to make the tough calls, and it may well be one of the strongest attributes on his CV. And if you're interested as to how that reads, he's the deputy chair of global equity fund Magellan Financial Group. That's handy, isn't it? And he's a former managing director of Australia's Network 10 and vice president at News Corp. TV connections, even handier. They need a broadcast partner. Hopefully, his contact list is live and very much up to date. While Rugby Australia gains one big asset, World Rugby loses another one. Augustine Pichot, the man New Zealand Rugby supported to effect change at the top of World Rugby, has resigned. He made a statement, "The only reason I've been part of World Rugby to this day was the conviction that World Rugby needs change." Well, it's not getting it, is it? Pichot narrowly lost to Bill Beaumont in the race to be World Rugby chair. Adios, Gus, and thanks.
Well, as we know, a lot of sports have been under serious pressure, and they're trying to find their way back into the light now that we have got to level 2 and trying to work out how it is their sports are going to go forward. Massive rescue package coming out of the government and the Minister of Sport and the Minister of Finance. Good combination to have. Grant Robertson joins us on the show tonight. Grant, I know it's been an incredibly difficult couple of months, but a rescue package, which is huge for sport. For you, where are the priorities right now for sports right across the country?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And I mean, for me, it's just making sure that we go through basically the same 3 stages that the country's going through, which is around responding to the immediate situation, building the recovery up, and then getting into the rebuild phase. So we've structured the package that we've put together for sport in those 3 phases. So I guess the most important thing for everybody right now at a grassroots level, a club level, right the way up to our professional teams is how do we make it through? And Sport New Zealand's already put some money aside for those community clubs to be able to, pay the power bill and the insurance and all of that. This package we've got's got about 80 million bucks in it for that immediate period, and then 2 packages to take us on from there, so that we can actually start to get on top of what a post-pandemic environment looks like. And then the final phase for the rebuild is probably the one where I hope we get to as quickly as we can, which is about what do we really need to do to actually take sport to a better place? And that's really about making sure that we make the most of technology, that we organise ourselves in such a way that at every level of the games that we all love, that there are people playing them and good solid clubs behind them. But I appreciate for most of the clubs, it's just about getting through right now.
Grant, I just want to ask, in terms of that, how do you get the balance right in that department between professional sports bodies that are hurting? Everyone's hurting at the moment, and also, some that have been crying out for funding before this pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, that is a really good question. I mean, the bottom line we've got is that for a number of the higher profile sports and professional franchises, they've got issues that are very immediate. We all want to see those competitions back out there. And so there is going to be some money to support that. But actually, the majority of the money will continue to go to grassroots sports, to national sporting organisations, to make sure that community sport happens, because actually those professional sports will get back on their feet eventually. But I'm really worried about the clubs who rely on sponsorship, local sponsorship, maybe from a business that's not doing so well anymore at the moment, particularly those who rely on the gaming trusts, of which there are a lot. And the reality is that that money is dried up too. So we've spent a lot of time making sure we do get the balance right. We want those professional competitions to get going, so there'll be some money for them in the initial phase. But then, beyond there, we really do want to get to those grassroots and community sports. And also for me, I recognise, for example, we've seen the debate with women's rugby around how we're going to make sure we make that a going concern when some of the major sponsors perhaps aren't in that space. So we've also factored that in too. But yeah, there's a balance to be struck, but I reckon we'll do it.
Look, there are a lot of sports, though, who have been growing in recent years, and you talk about the women's game, particularly in rugby. The numbers have been impressive over the last 3 or 4 years. But for you, how do you decide who gets the funding across all of these sports? What's the process? Does each sport come to you on an individual basis?
Yeah, pretty much, actually. So Sport New Zealand and High Performance Sport New Zealand will be managing the process. They're going to work first and foremost with what we call the NSOs, the National Sporting Organisations, so the likes of New Zealand Rugby, New Zealand Cricket, Netball, New Zealand Football. Sit down with them and say, okay, where's your sport at? And then work through those to see it divvied up among clubs and so on. We also want to make sure, and this is a really important point actually, that it's not just the sports who have an existing relationship with Sport New Zealand. When we get to the taekwondos and the sports that are a little bit less in that mainstream, we also want to make sure that they're getting supported, so those organisations come through. And the other kind of critical player in this are the regional sports trusts, and they do a great job in our local communities, really at that grassroots level. So we'll also work through them, and in fact, that first round of funding, which is already out there from Sport New Zealand, has been delivered through those regional sports trusts. So, yeah, my advice would be to any clubs that are out there and interested. Firstly, speak to your either your regional or your national organisation, and then from there to Sport New Zealand.
Grant, how much of that consideration do you take into account into the return that you get from your investment? You talk about the women's game and rugby in particular, but sort of the return you may get sort of for the Rugby World Cup that's about to happen. So how much of that do you take into account the investment the return you're going to get in your investment?
Yeah, look, I think, that's a really important way of thinking about it, but that return's not necessarily a dollar return per se, but it's a return on what the outcomes we're looking for. And one of the things I've been thinking about a lot in terms of rugby is the World Cup in 2021. We've got to win that, and in order to win it for a whole lot of reasons, and in order to do that, we need a Farah Palmer Cup, frankly. We need our team to be as competitive as possible through 2020, 2021. I know New Zealand Rugby had a whole load of plans about that they were working towards, including I'd heard talk of, a quasi-super competition in 2021 to really build up. I hope that we can get alongside them and work on that. But equally, New Zealand Rugby know they've got their own responsibilities there. So every single sport has been decimated by COVID-19. There's not one that hasn't been, in terms of funding, in terms of the way they go about organising themselves. And so this package and the scale of it is a recognition of that. So
in terms of planning for a return on the field, what should our communities maybe expect from the sports?
Yeah, look, I think at the moment what we're looking for from the sports is that this period we're in right now in level 2 is a bit challenging. So professional sports, I saw some footage today of some of the super teams back training, which is great. But for local and community sports and clubs, this is the period to be preparing your club for things like contact tracing, making sure you've got all the proper hygiene facilities and all of that, and then starting to get back into training, groups of 10 or less initially, and then build that up. Hopefully we go well with where we are, which case-wise we are at the moment, and we'll be in a position where those numbers for gatherings will grow. So then we'll be in a position to be getting games back going, towards the beginning of June, end of May, beginning of June. So that's what people should be looking for and working with their clubs. In terms of the funding, as I say, there's a little bit already coming through from Sport New Zealand. People should now be thinking, okay, what do we need to get us to the next stage? What's the gap in funding, and how might that be filled? But like every sector of society, what we're doing may not be able to fill every single gap, but this is the biggest allocation sports ever had. And I really do want us to get to those second and third phases too, where we're actually starting to think, well, what can we make better? For example, we've had a lot of conversations about whether or not national sporting organisations could be more effective if they maybe merge some of their back offices, actually got shared IT systems, that kind of stuff. So we actually want to do as much as we can to support that, because the more we do of that, the more money gets to the front line and grassroots sport.
Well, we love to hate them on the field, and I'm talking about our Trans-Tasman rivals. I mean, I know it could be a long shot, but are we getting a little bit closer to opening up those borders, Grant?
Well, there's a lot of goodwill to do it, and both countries have done really well. If you look at compared to the rest of the world in terms of how we've gotten on top of the virus, both countries can stand up and say we've done really well. So Jacinda Ardern and Scott Morrison, the Australian Prime Minister, have been talking. Both of them recognise it's not going to happen right away. We've both got to be really comfortable we're on top of the virus. And the last thing either of us would want to do would be responsible for reintroducing it to the other country. So I've heard Scott Morrison mention, sometime from July onwards, wouldn't it be great in the second half of the year if we were able to get a decent Bledisloe Cup competition going? And I know the cricketers have been talking about getting themselves over there as well. So that's what we're working towards. And yeah, we've just got to keep doing what we've been doing up to now.
There's a good reason, though, they're talking like that in Australia, because they think this is their chance to get the Bledisloe Cup back. The fact we haven't had a chance to play, beating them down.
Ruin it, though, because that was one of the gags going around, wasn't it? That one of the best things about coronavirus was that the Wallabies would have an unbeaten season.
That's just mean. That is absolutely just mean. I suppose we've talked about the sporting bodies. What can the community do to help get this process going forward and make sure it does work, that we don't compromise the good work we have done, particularly when it comes to their involvement in sport?
Yeah, look, the big thing for us is that going forward from here, we've just got to remember those really basic things. And I mentioned hygiene before. I mean, one of the things we're asking clubs to do is actually make sure that there is hot water and towels, and actually that people don't just sort of forget about that too quickly. The other thing is the contact tracing, and I know this is kind of a phrase people have probably heard and they wonder what does it really mean, but basically it means knowing who's been in the club room. So in the horrible and unlikely event that there is some kind of breakout of cases, the club can know straight away who was there. Bottom line is, we all know that those clubs rely on volunteers, and those people are still going to be needed. The financial contributions we're looking to make are just making up for some of the ground that's been lost. It's still going to be those volunteers who actually make it all happen.
Grant, in saying that, though, we're not going to be able to protect everyone. The fact that there are some sacrifices that teams and organisations are going to have to make, right? Given the fact whether it's shorter seasons, whether there are things that they'll have to forego in 2020. But that's not to say they can't come back in the future.
Absolutely not. And that's part of what this is about, is saying, I think we all recognize 2020 from a competition point of view is going to be a huge challenge. And some competitions won't get going. You know, I mean, I know in the schools, they're really grappling with how they're going to organize themselves. A lot of inter-schools and things have had to go by the wayside already. And so, you know, you're right, we're all going to see sacrifices in how we go there. But you know, getting a little bit of live sport going, which I know is going to be a big thing for Sky Sport, is going to be huge. And then getting some of those competitions going. And we really do want people just to ease their way in. I think when we announced the level 2 guidance, people were kind of like, right, we've got to get our competition going. It's actually better to just build up to it, get everyone trained. Even at a community level, you still need a couple of trainings before you hit the paddock. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of injuries. And so we just want to make sure we've got people, you know, taking their time, easing their way. And as you say, even if 2020's a shortened season, one where not all the trophies get handed out, that'll, you know, we've got the opportunity to come back really strong 2021. And bear in mind, there's other countries in the world who are a hell of a long way away from thinking about playing competitive sport or community sport.
Grant, who have you got? Who have you got Super Rugby Aotearoa? I know you're a big fan of Sam Cane.
No, I'll be backing the Highlanders. I didn't have a pet lamb named Jeff Wilson when I was growing up, unlike Sam. But I was there supporting Goldie on the side of Kara's box. So.
Man, what a setup. I mean, it doesn't get any worse than that. What a setup. What a way to come in. That's absolutely ridiculous. All I want to do is thank you very much, Grant, for allowing Nehemiah Scudder to come on down south, put on a Highlanders jersey, put him under a roof and watch him play. Look, thank you so much for all the great work you have done to date. I know you haven't spent a lot of days at home in the last 8 weeks. You've told this to us before, but keep working hard. I know you'll keep doing that. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to catch up.
Cheers, Goldie. Thank you.
It's fantastic to get Grant Robertson, who's the Minister of Finance and Sport, on this show to give us that sort of information. And Bernie, you get the sense that the community game, the grassroots game, is incredibly important to Grant, both men and women's as well. The fact that the establishing of what we can get back out there and do in the short term for our community and for our player fan base.
Oh, absolutely. Because if grassroots is strong, no matter what the sport, the rest flows up, doesn't it? And then we get top tier teams that are performing as well. I mean, my kids are playing all manner of sports, much like yours, Jeff, and Mills. You know, we've got hockey, we've got netball and rugby, very much in a holding pattern at the moment. So it is frustrating that the wait continues, but it is a necessity and we just have to be patient. I'm coaching, managing as well. We're getting emails daily, but we must just wait. My concern was that the young kids, the littlies, the 5-year-olds who are going to get their first taste of sport may not because of this COVID. But again, it's coming back to that patience. And you've got to remember that sport and reg contributes $5 billion to New Zealand's GDP. That is massive money, 53,000 odd jobs. So while it's really important at the community level, it really is a must to get everything else flying. And if COVID's taught us nothing else other than how close the TV is to the fridge, it's got us out moving as well, hasn't it?
I think the key is getting that balance right. You know, there's obvious talk around that, you know, the professional game, you know, from what Grant's mentioned, that, you know, he's quite happy that we'll end up getting back to where it was, but you've still got to look after the grassroots. And that sort of was really clear to me in what he was saying, the fact that, you know, underneath it all, you've got to get everyone participating. And yes, there's been a lot of hurt. So the balance of where that funding goes, and I know, you know, NZ Sport, you know, are very, got a big part in sort of distributing that money.
They're investing a lot of money, Bernie, across a number of different stages. He's talked about that as well, trying to future-proof the game. But it's not just happening here. We talked about a little bit earlier on in the news about how players are looking at what's the best interest for them in the professional level. Some are heading overseas. The situation in Australia and the investment that seems to not be there in the game. Is there security? So if you look across New Zealand at the moment, there are some sacrifices probably that are going to have to be made at some point by some people, and it's not going to be the same in 2021. Rob Nichol, who's the head of the Players Association, talked about the fact that maybe some players will have to look at having another job. So there are some harsh realities that is going to happen the fact that at some level, like I say, some change is going to have to happen?
Oh, there's been huge change. And right back when you mentioned about what Rob spoke about there are a lot of uncertainties. There still is a wee bit of that, but we're beginning to see a little bit of clarity. The uncertain bit about it now is player movement and what that sort of looks like. All of a sudden, like everyone else, there's a lot of hurt, which means there's not much funding. And so when you look at what you're speaking about, Bernie, in terms of professionalism and where that's gone to, and having, a sport and being a professional athlete, that's now moved on now to, almost, thinking about where that lies within each individual. And that's what you've got to take into account these days, especially with, a lot of our athletes is, yes, it is where you can make a living. But now, I suppose the mindset also is about, how best you can take care of yourself.
You both in the professional era. Did you think for a second that we would come to this, that you'd be hearing someone like Rob Nichols saying, guys, you might actually have to go out and get a trade? Did you for a second think that was going to be a reality?
Well, I think the reality is what's happened here is, and we've heard it said so many times, it's unprecedented, the fact that the challenges financially and the logistical challenges you have of trying to get things up and running again when you change your structure due to the fact that all of a sudden windows have changed and travel schedules change. And look, there aren't as many planes up in the air right now. Look, there are some things at the moment where, yes, there are a lot of people who'd like to know more. I think we'll know when NZR manages to find a way through this and past some of those logistical challenges, which are not easy to work through.
And you talk about this too, guys, because the thing is they need to get that right. Otherwise, you're going to get professional players bouncing around the world, following the dollars. They're going to be on the mouse wheel. Unless the structure is solid and it works globally, it's just going to continue to have players bouncing around the globe.
Well, Ian Foster has been very, very busy. He's involved with a very special charity, the Big Buddy Breakfast Series, Boys Without Dads charity. Ian Foster speaks with Simon Barnett. Tickets to the event can be purchased by making a donation at bigbuddy.org.nz/breakfast-series. Stay with us after the break. We catch up with the captain of the Blues in 2020, Patrick Tuipulotu.
Paddy in particular is leading really well. Paddy's leadership coming on leaps and bounds as a captain, and they followed them there today.
Look, we can't look to the past too much. We know it's been a disappointing past. We can only focus on what we do now.
Gets it to Marchant. Marchant will march through. Absolutely hammered. What a try!
We've heard inside the Crusaders camp with Razor Robertson early on in the show. Let's go inside the Blues camp now. And Razor wasn't tired. He was mentally tired, but physically tired. It's Patrick Tuipulotu and Paddy. Welcome to the breakdown. Welcome back to the rugby field today. It was yesterday, it was fitness testing. And reality is, I hear 8 PBs. Were you one of them?
No, I wasn't one of them today.
Oh.
Today, no, it wasn't. No.
It wasn't you? So what was it? What did you get up to?
I had a bronco test. So obviously, fitness test done. That was it for the testing, really. And then it was just basically us getting back into some rugby, getting the hands on the rugby ball and getting some line-out lifts, line-out jumps, and into the scrum for us forwards.
Paddy, what's the mood amongst the boys? I know it's been some challenging times. I've seen on social media you guys have done a bit on there, but coming in yesterday, how stoked were the boys to see each other and give each other some high fives?
Pretty exciting. It was pretty funny though. We're not allowed to give each other high fives. Sort of trying to figure out what the new high five is for us. Just turning up in our small groups, getting ready to train together. But saying that, it's just good to be around the boys and get some banter going. It's been a while.
Have you been, in particular though, having a lot of conversations with the coaching group in preparation for coming back?
Yeah, I sort of had the first 4 weeks of lockdown to myself. I think everyone did. And then I think once we went into level 3, there was a lot more conversations among myself, our leadership group and the coaches just to get a plan ready, get together with the trainer and sort of figure out what our structure, our weekly structure would look like, and just some simple things to get us started off.
Paddy, I want to ask. I mean, you mentioned it, second time round doing preseason, man. I used to hate just doing one. But what's your mindset on a personal level, man? Does it suck coming in knowing that you have to do preseason all over again? Be honest.
Yeah, it does suck, but I think one thing I've learned is it's easier to maintain than sort of come back and try to start all over again. So if most of us were chipping away, we had some good programs, and I think coming in this week, a lot of us have showed that we're actually in a good spot now, better than we were when we turned up to the first preseason.
Well, something significantly different though. You've got a certain individual who the word got out really quickly yesterday. He runs in his Bronco a personal best, Bowden Barrett. When you add him to what you've already done in 2020, surely inside your group, your expectations of exactly what you're capable of have changed.
Yeah, we don't want to put too much expectation on what he brings and what he's going to do. I think if we just let him do his thing and let him do it naturally, then that'll be the best. That'll be best for us. I mean, every individual in this team has got a job to do. If we're focusing on what he can do, and we know what he can do, then I think that'll take us away from what each individual can actually bring to the team. So it's very exciting that we have the chance to have him in the squad and ready in a couple of weeks. But saying that, he's got to pave his way just like the rest of us.
Nice. What are you hoping that the return of Super Rugby and this competition in particular is going to give the fans and the people at home?
More so just a sense of happiness and joy. Hopefully bring a smile to a lot of families' faces. We know obviously it's been a tough time, and I know it's hard out there for most families who are struggling. And so for us to get back out there and do what we can do, we're part of the fortunate few that are still able to. So we take that in our stride, and if we're able to perform well, give some good rugby, and put a smile on a little young girl's face, then we're pretty happy.
You've had a fantastic start to 2020 personally, the way that you were playing. Are you missing smashing people?
You can only hit a tackle shield so much in training. So, yeah, looking forward to getting some physicality in amongst these shoulders of mine and amongst the team. So, no, definitely looking forward to the physical contest against another Super Rugby team, let alone in a derby.
Mates, they're all listening to you going, I know what's coming. I know what's coming. I know exactly where I would be if I was on the other side of a tackle shield right now. Paddy, great to have you on your show. It's great to have you back and doing your work. Look after yourself, stay safe, but lead that team, lead them well. And we're looking forward to seeing you back in action. See you soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, Razor's excited. Patrick Tuipulotu's excited. Dr. Ashley Bloomfield is happy. The fact we're out there playing rugby again. Scott Robertson is giving us support we need. That's everything we need, team. Bernie, Mills, for us to play some rugby very, very soon. Well, just 3 weeks away now. I can't wait.
There's going to be some sore bodies. I know the guys are keen to get out there, but Super Rugby Aotearoa is going to be next level. They're going to bring it. I can't wait.
Another week closer, guys. No, I can't wait either. So it's interesting hearing out of a couple of the camps there. They're very, very excited, but we're a week closer. Looking forward to it.
Bring it on. Thanks for watching The Breakdown. Wherever you are, we'll be back. Same place, same time next week.